You'll always be the poor one. My sister didn't whisper it. She announced it. Loud enough that the room went quiet. Loud enough that the relatives pretending not to listen suddenly found very interesting spots on the ceiling. Loud enough that I felt the words land. Not like an insult, but like a verdict she believed had already been signed. I stood there with my purse looped over my arm, fingers resting casually against the leather, and smiled. Not because it didn't hurt, but because of what was inside that bag. They didn't know what I had already done. It was my father's house, but it had never felt like mine. Even before he died, the walls carried her presence more than mine. Her taste. Her opinions. Her certainty that this place, and everything connected to it, belonged to her by default. She was older. Louder. Married better. I was the quiet one. The one who moved cities instead of settling down. The one whose life looked unimpressive when summarized over coffee. So when she said it, no one corrected her. Not even my stepmother, who flinched but kept her mouth shut. I met my sister's eyes across the living room. She was smiling. Satisfied. You know I'm right, she continued, folding her arms. Some people are just meant to scrape by. There's nothing wrong with that. I nodded slowly. That's true, I said. Her smile widened. She thought I was agreeing. The gathering had started as a reading of the will. That alone should have told me something was wrong. My father had hated drama. Hated spectacle. If he could have avoided this room full of people, he would have. But here we were, squeezed together with fake sympathy and forced condolences, waiting for paperwork to divide what little warmth he'd left behind. The lawyer hadn't arrived yet. Delayed, they said. My sister took that as an opportunity. She always did. You should start thinking practically, she went on, glancing at my shoes. You can't afford to be proud. I felt heat rise to my face. Not embarrassment, but memory. All the time she'd said similar things growing up. When I chose a different college. When I moved out early. When I refused her help because it always came with strings. She leaned closer. Don't worry, she said sweetly. I'll make sure you're okay. I smiled again. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that this wasn't the inheritance meeting. That had already happened. Quietly. Privately. Weeks ago. My phone buzzed in my purse. Once. I ignored it. The leather felt heavier than usual against my side. Not because of weight, but because of meaning. Inside was a sealed envelope. Cream paper. Embossed letterhead. My name typed neatly across the front. I'd reread it so many times the creases had softened. Not money. Not yet. Something far more devastating. You're being awfully calm, my sister said, narrowing her eyes. Did you expect more than you deserve? I shrugged lightly. I stopped expecting things a long time ago. That earned a laugh from someone behind her. She took it as encouragement. Exactly, she said. Some of us work harder. Some of us marry smarter. Some of us, she gestured vaguely toward me, make choices. I wondered briefly if she remembered all the times I'd stayed late at the hospital with Dad while she was busy. If she remembered who actually listened when he talked. Who drove him to appointments. Who didn't interrupt him when he said the same story twice. But memory only matters if you value it. She never had. The doorbell rang. Everyone jumped. The lawyer had arrived. I felt the shift immediately. Like the room inhaled all at once. My sister straightened her blouse, already preparing to receive what she assumed was confirmation. I adjusted my purse strap. The letter inside pressed lightly against my hip. A reminder. We sat. The lawyer cleared his throat. Apologies were exchanged. Formalities followed. My sister barely listened, eyes already calculating square footage and account balances. I watched her. Not with anger. With curiosity. Because arrogance is fascinating when it's about to collide with reality. Before he could begin, My sister leaned over and whispered, "Don't take this personally." I met her gaze. "I never do," I said. And for the first time, something flickered across her face. Uncertainty. What I didn't realize then was that my father's final decision wasn't just about money. It was about recognition. And once that letter came out of my bag, nothing in this family would ever return to balance. My sister liked to say she'd raised me. It was one of her favorite stories, told loudly, usually in front of strangers. "I practically brought her up myself," she'd laugh. "Our parents were always busy." The truth was quieter. She left early. I stayed. When our father got sick the first time, years before anyone used the word terminal, she was already gone, living a life that looked impressive in photographs. I was the one who learned how to make his coffee the way he liked it after the medication changed his taste. 2 sugars. No milk. He noticed things like that. The afternoons were when he talked. Not about money. Not about regrets. About people. Who showed up. Who disappeared. Who spoke at him instead of to him. I listened. That was always my strength. One evening, while I was sorting through old paperwork at his kitchen table, he watched me for a long time without speaking. "You know," he said finally, "people confuse ambition with value." I looked up. "What do you mean?" "They think the loudest person wins," he said. "But life doesn't work that way." He tapped the table once, thoughtfully. "It rewards consistency." I didn't realize then that he was already making decisions. When his condition worsened, my sister came back more often. Not to stay. To supervise. She criticized the nurses. Questioned the doctors. Reorganized things that didn't need reorganizing. She never noticed how tired he looked after she left. Or how relieved he seemed when the door closed behind her. "She means well," I said once when he sighed heavily. "I know," he replied. "She always does." The conversation that changed everything happened on a Tuesday. Nothing dramatic. No hospital alarms. No raised voices. Just the two of us sitting in the living room while rain tapped softly against the windows. "I want you to promise me something," he said. I turned toward him. "Don't let anyone tell you what you're worth," he said. "Not even family." I smiled. "I won't." He nodded, satisfied. Then he reached for the folder on the side table. I hadn't known what it was at first. Just documents. Property records. Accounts. Letters. And then one envelope. Sealed. With my name on it. He didn't hand it to me right away. "Read it when the time comes," he said. "When is that?" I asked. "When you need to remember who you are," he replied. I didn't open it that night. Or the next. I waited until after the funeral, after the casseroles stopped arriving, after my sister went back to her life. I sat alone in my apartment, the envelope resting on my lap, my hands shaking. Inside wasn't money. Not directly. It was authority. My father had rewritten everything. Not the will. Something deeper. A trust. One that placed me, not my sister, in control. Properties. Assets. Decisions. And a letter explaining why. "You've always understood the difference between having and being," he wrote. "I trust you to remember it when others won't." I cried then. Not because I was relieved. But because he'd seen me. The inheritance letter in my bag wasn't proof of wealth. It was proof of judgment. And my sister, the one who believed money was destiny, had no idea that destiny was already sealed. Back in the living room, as the lawyer adjusted his papers, I felt the weight of the past settle calmly in my chest. My sister crossed her legs confidently. I crossed my ankles. She thought the story was about numbers. She was wrong. What I didn't realize then was how violently she would react when she learned the truth. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. That sound, small, professional, cut through the room like a blade. Conversations died instantly. Chairs shifted. My sister straightened, folding her hands in her lap like someone about to be rewarded for patience. I felt the letter in my bag press softly against my side. Steady. Certain. The lawyer began with the usual language. Dates. Legal phrasing. Sentences so carefully neutral they felt almost hollow. This document reflects the final wishes of, in full mental capacity, having considered all heirs. My sister nodded along, already counting. The house. The accounts. The recognition. She didn't once look at me. The first bequest was small. Personal items. Jewelry. Furniture. My sister smiled indulgently when my name wasn't mentioned. Then the lawyer paused. He glanced up, just briefly, and his eyes landed on me. Not by accident. I felt the room shift. Regarding the family trust, he said. My sister leaned forward. This trust was amended 6 months prior to Mr. Calder's passing. Her smile froze. The appointed trustee, he continued, is... He said my name. Out loud. Clear. Unmistakable. For half a second, no one reacted. Like the words hadn't found a place to land. Then my sister laughed. A sharp, disbelieving sound. That's not funny, she said. Very funny, but, no. The lawyer didn't look at her. As trustee, he continued calmly, she will oversee all major assets, including properties, liquid accounts, and future disbursements. The room erupted. Questions. Gasps. Someone whispered my name like it was a mistake that might correct itself if repeated. My sister stood abruptly. No, she said. That's not right. There has to be an error. The lawyer finally looked at her. There is no error, he said evenly. Your father was very clear. I stayed seated. That mattered. My sister turned to me slowly, eyes wide, not with shock, but with betrayal. You did this, she said. I met her gaze. I didn't, I replied. He did. She laughed again, but this time it cracked. You manipulated him, she said. You were always around. Always whispering. I shook my head. I listened, I said. There's a difference. She turned back to the lawyer. She's not qualified, she snapped. She doesn't even make real money. The lawyer didn't flinch. Your father anticipated this concern, he said. Which is why he included a letter. My heart slowed. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a familiar envelope. Cream paper. Embossed letterhead. My sister's mouth fell open. That letter, the lawyer said, was intended to be read aloud if necessary. Necessary had arrived. He began. The room went silent again, but this time it wasn't polite. It was stunned. To my family, the letter started. If you are hearing this, then the truth has finally caught up with us. My sister shook her head, whispering, No, no, no. The lawyer continued. I've watched my daughters grow into very different women. One learned how to be seen. The other learned how to be steady. My sister's hands curled into fists. I've learned, through illness, which of those traits lasts. The words hit harder now. Because they weren't about money. They were about character. I felt eyes turn toward me. Not with laughter. With something else. Recognition. Confusion. Recalibration. Low music. Soft laughter. The hum of deals being referenced without being discussed. I introduced my family to people they didn't know how to place. This is my mother. My uncle. My cousin. No titles. No explanations. I watched my cousin's expression change as each handshake lingered just a second longer than polite. Nice to meet you, one man said. I've heard a lot. About me. Not the idea. Me. Drinks were served. My uncle leaned in. So, he said. What exactly is this milestone? I tilted my head. You'll see. He chuckled nervously. You're being mysterious. I smiled. When the room was full, the music softened. A man stepped onto the small stage. Well-dressed. Confident. Someone my family immediately recognized as important. He thanked everyone for coming. Talked about growth. Vision. Market shifts. Then he said my name. I felt every eye turn toward me, including theirs. This wouldn't exist without her, he said. Not as an idea, but as a company. The room applauded. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My cousin stared. The man continued. And tomorrow morning, he added, you'll see her work in a place most startups never reach. The screen behind him lit up. A skyline. A familiar curve of digital signage. The Nasdaq building. My family didn't breathe. The image shifted. My company's name filled the banner. Bright. Unmissable. Public. The room erupted. Applause. Cheers. Phones lifted. I stood still. I didn't smile. I looked at my family. My uncle's face had gone pale. My aunt's eyes glistened. My cousin's mouth hung open. My mother just stared at me, something breaking open behind her eyes. They'd laughed at this. At me. And now it was larger than all of us. My cousin found his voice first. Wait, he said. You're going public. I shook my head. No, I said. We already did. Silence. He swallowed. When? He asked. I checked my watch. 30 minutes ago. The rest of the night blurred. Congratulations. Photos. Questions. My family stayed close to me, like proximity could rewrite history. My uncle apologized. My aunt cried. My cousin asked if I was hiring. I answered none of it. Because revenge doesn't need commentary. It just needs contrast. As they left, my mother hugged me tightly. I should have listened, she whispered. I held her. You did, I said. Eventually. She nodded. Later, alone again, I stood by the window overlooking the city. The Nasdaq banner glowed in the distance, my company's name cycling through like it belonged there. Because it did. They didn't know what I had already done. They only knew now. And somehow, that made all the difference. Success doesn't arrive with clarity. It arrives with noise. The morning after the banner went live, my phone didn't stop vibrating. Messages stacked on top of each other until individual names stopped meaning anything. Congratulations blurred into requests. Pride tangled with entitlement. I didn't respond right away. I watched the city wake up instead. From my window, the Nasdaq building still glowed faintly in the early light, like proof the night hadn't been a dream. My company's name wasn't there anymore, the banner rotated, but something had shifted permanently. You don't unsee yourself that big. My family was quieter. That was new. The group chat, once filled with articles about safe careers and unsolicited advice, went silent. When it finally broke, it wasn't with celebration. It was with confusion. So, what happens now? My aunt asked. I typed, erased, typed again. Now we work. No emojis. No explanation. The calls started later. My uncle first. I just wanted to say, he began, voice careful. We didn't realize how serious it was. I held the phone away from my ear for a second, then brought it back. I know, I said. That laughter, he continued. It wasn't meant to. It was, I said gently. And that's okay. He paused. I'm proud of you, he said. I believed him. That didn't mean it changed anything. My cousin's call came that evening. His tone was different now. Lighter, rehearsed. So, he said, crazy week, huh? Busy, I replied. I showed your thing to some people, he continued. They were impressed. I waited. You know, he added, if you ever need help scaling. No, I said. Silence. I didn't mean. I know, I said again. But no. He laughed awkwardly. Right. Of course. We hung up shortly after. For the first time in our lives, there was nothing left to explain. My mother came to see me a week later. She stood in my kitchen, hands wrapped around a mug, looking around like she was searching for the version of me she thought she knew. "I tell people about you now," she said softly. I smiled. "What do you say?" "That my daughter built something big," she said. "That I always believed in her." I met her eyes. She flinched. "I didn't always," she corrected. "No," I agreed. "You didn't." She nodded, accepting it. "But I do now," she said. That was enough. Success changes the questions people ask. Not why anymore. But how can I be part of it? Former acquaintances resurfaced with friendly messages and thinly veiled expectations. Distant relatives discovered pride. Old co-workers remembered my name. I learned a new skill then. Saying no without guilt. One afternoon, I received a message from an unfamiliar number. When the court ruling became final, that voice disappeared. No calls. No messages. No intermediaries. Nothing. And in that nothing, I finally understood what my father had given me. Peace. I didn't change my lifestyle right away. That surprised people. I kept my apartment. My routines. My quiet mornings with coffee by the window. The trust accounts were handled carefully, deliberately, exactly the way my father had instructed. Preserve first. Grow second. Display never. I remembered his words often. Having and being are not the same. The first real test came months later. A distant cousin, one who'd never known my birthday, called to congratulate me. "I heard you're doing very well now," she said brightly. "I'm doing fine," I replied. She laughed. "You know what I mean." I did. "I don't talk about money," I said. She paused. "Oh," she said. "Right." We never spoke again. At the next family gathering, the dynamic had shifted completely. No one spoke over me. No one teased. No one made assumptions about my life. I wasn't suddenly adored, but I was respected. And the difference between those two things is everything. My stepmother pulled me aside that evening. "He trusted you," she said quietly. "More than anyone realized." "I know," I replied. "You don't resent her?" she asked, glancing toward the other room. I thought about my sister. The certainty. The cruelty disguised as confidence. The fear underneath it all. "No," I said honestly. "I outgrew her." Years passed. The trust grew. The properties stabilized. I made decisions slowly, carefully, always imagining my father sitting across from me, watching not what I chose, but how I chose it. Sometimes, late at night, I took the original letter out of its safe. Not to reread it. Just to remember the weight of the envelope. The feeling of being chosen without asking. I heard about my sister occasionally. Through mutual acquaintances. Through whispers. Her marriage strained. Her finances tighter than expected. Her confidence dulled. She never reached out again. And I never chased closure. Because closure had already happened. In that living room, in that moment she laughed and declared my fate. She had been wrong. And she knew it. One afternoon, while organizing old documents, I found a photo tucked into a folder. My father and me. Sitting on the back steps. Both of us squinting into the sun. I was laughing. Unself-conscious. Unafraid. I realized then that this, the ability to exist without being diminished, was the real inheritance. Not the accounts. Not the property. Not the power. But the certainty. People still ask sometimes. How did you handle it? Didn't it feel good to prove her wrong? I always answer the same way. I didn't prove anything, I say. I let the truth arrive on its own. Because revenge isn't loud. It doesn't shout. It doesn't declare. It waits. My sister once said I would always be the poor one. She thought poverty meant numbers. She never understood that poverty is believing your worth can be taken away by someone louder than you. And that was something I'd never been. Not even when she thought she'd won. Sometimes, when I leave the house, I still carry that old letter in my bag. Not because I need it, but because it reminds me of the moment everything changed. The moment I smiled while she laughed. The moment I knew, before anyone else did, that the story she was telling about me had already ended. They didn't know what I had already done. But I did. And that was enough. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.